Yeah, that's crazy, man. I just heard about that. But you heard about the reports that Ashton Kutcher, he's worried that Diddy might lie on his friends? You heard about that?
But that's what I've been saying. I said, if the federal government wanted somebody more than they want Diddy, if he has some information about some people that they would rather have other than him, he's able to get that information to them. But they gotta want it. They gotta want it. And Ashton Kutcher and him they were real tight. One time, me, him, Ashton Kutcher went to a Nets game and we met Jay-Z there. You know what I'm saying? So they were close, they was cool.
But you think Diddy would do something like that? Lie on other celebrities?
Well, why would it have to be a lie? Because if he get caught in, he gonna be as truthful as possible. You understand? He's gonna give them enough information, whereas that it's gonna make him look like the choir boy. So Ashton Kutcher, he has a right to be kind of alarmed if he was doing things with Diddy. Remember they used to have that group called the what do they call it? The Brat Pack, with Diddy, him, and a couple other guys was hanging out. Leonardo, one other guy too. I forgot the other guy's name.
Before anything began, the audience was warned. What you're about to hear isn't fiction. This isn't a TV drama, and it's definitely not tabloid gossip. This is real testimony, recorded during a federal trial in the heart of Manhattan, where one of the most powerful figures in the entertainment world is being brought into the light. Sean Diddy Combs. And the person taking the stand is none other than one of America's once most beloved faces, Ashton Kutcher. Once the goofy guy from that 70s show, later a savvy tech investor and an Instagram-perfect dad, Ashton now appeared before the cameras with heavy eyes, a tightly knotted tie, and beads of sweat forming on his forehead. He didn't walk into the courtroom like a celebrity strutting down a red carpet. He walked in like a man confronting truths long buried, haunted by the ghosts of a past that had shadowed him for over a decade. The moment his name was called, the room fell silent. Diddy sat motionless, expressionless, eyes fixed ahead. Journalists pulled out their pens. Recorders lit up. Ashton's footsteps echoed sharply through the tension-filled courtroom. And then, no introductions, no polite openings, Ashton dropped a line that stunned the entire room. "I'm not just here to distance myself from him. I'm here to say what no one else will." The story Ashton was about to tell wasn't just about Diddy. It would pull back the curtain on a dark corner of the industry. One filled with silence, hidden deals, and the steep price of fame. Ashton began his testimony by revisiting what was supposed to be the golden era of his life, both professionally and personally. But in hindsight, he now calls it dangerously naive. Back then, he was young, wildly famous thanks to his role as Michael Kelso, dating Hollywood's A-listers, and a staple at elite Hollywood parties. That's where he met Diddy, who at the time wasn't just a hip-hop artist, but a symbol of power and control in the entertainment world. Together, they formed what the media would later dub the New Hollywood Rat Pack. Unofficial members included Diddy, Ashton, Danny Masterson, and Wilmer Valderrama, a crew of young, rich, famous men who seemed untouchable. They didn't party like regular people. They threw exclusive mansion gatherings without clocks, without windows, filled with models and influencers. They traveled on private jets, had personal security, and even brought along PR cleanup crews. What happened behind those closed doors? No one on the outside ever knew. At first, Ashton thought this was just celebrity life, the perks of being part of Hollywood's upper crust. Nothing seemed wrong, at least, not on the surface. But over time, things became more structured. The parties turned into curated experiences, elaborately staged events that felt more like performances than parties, yet strictly off-limits to the public. Guests were ushered into zones based on their level of access. Anyone who hadn't signed an NDA wasn't allowed into the deeper areas. Phones and cameras were confiscated at the door. Everything was cleaned up before sunrise. Ashton admitted that he didn't question any of it back then. He was benefiting. He was invited. He was part of a brotherhood others only dreamed of entering. Everything was too glamorous to raise doubts. Yet deep down, something felt off. He just didn't have the courage to confront it. That truth finally came into focus when the FBI raided Diddy's home and seized footage from 2009. footage that showed Ashton, unaware he was being filmed. What once seemed like harmless memories suddenly reeked of guilt. In court, the proceedings were moving steadily, until the prosecution presented an audio recording retrieved during one of the raids on Diddy's properties. The clip was grainy, full of background noise, music, clinking glasses, laughter, and then a voice, Ashton's, hesitant and uneasy. "I don't think we should be recording this. Seriously, this is going too far." A cold, male voice replied, "Relax. They already signed." The courtroom froze. No one moved.
No whispers.
That recording confirmed it. Ashton hadn't just attended Diddy's parties, he had directly expressed concern. And, most crucially, he had been ignored. When the prosecutor asked, "Ashton, who were you talking about in that recording?" Ashton's eyes drifted to the defense table, where Diddy still sat, stone-faced. A long silence followed. Then Ashton quietly replied, "The guests. Some were models. Some weren't. But none of them knew what was coming." Ashton went on to testify that at those parties, Diddy had a specific crew. People who never appeared on camera, never interacted with guests, but wielded total control. They collected phones, checked IDs, and funneled people into designated spaces like backstage handlers. Most notably, everyone was required to sign NDAs right at the door, a routine Ashton said had become so normal, nobody even questioned it. He confessed he had signed several himself, multiple times. "I thought it was standard. In Hollywood, someone's always cleaning up behind the scenes. I didn't think twice. But now, I know better." The questioning continued, and bits of memory began to resurface. He recalled one time, after a party, a friend, whose name he withheld, leaned in and whispered, "Was that okay tonight?" Ashton had laughed it off. "I told him, they're all adults, man. They know what they're doing." But the truth is, not everyone did. From there, Ashton's testimony began revealing an underground world the public had never truly seen. A world where the spotlight masked an entire machine, where power and fame could bend both truth and memory. Ashton picked up his testimony with a sentence that cast an even darker shadow over the courtroom. "I used to think I was living the American dream. Turns out, I was just a part of a very well-designed nightmare." He recounted the peak of the Hollywood Rat Pack era, when they were on every magazine cover and every brand wanted a piece of them. Diddy was the ringleader. He didn't just host parties. He was the stage director, the casting agent, the scriptwriter, even when there weren't any cameras rolling. These random events were anything but. Everything was planned to perfection. A new influencer would be invited. Next week, she'd be the face of a fashion label Diddy had invested in. A hot girl who showed up at 3 parties? A month later, she'd land a cameo in a major music video heavily promoted by YouTube. Ashton called it an image manufacturing machine that worked overnight. There were certain rooms in Diddy's mansions no one could enter unless they were vouched for. A-list celebrities could walk right in. Newcomers? They had to wait in line like everyone else. Some got picked. Others were turned away, and never understood why. "I never knew who was filtering guests," Ashton admitted. "I just knew that those who got inside, their names would start showing up on blogs, or they'd land strange endorsement deals the next day." He remembered one specific instance. A yacht trip Diddy invited him on, with a few others. At first, it seemed like a regular getaway, until Diddy showed up with a group of unfamiliar women in swimsuits, all of them visibly uneasy. They all signed. "Don't worry," Diddy said, sipping champagne. Everyone laughed. Ashton laughed too, but deep inside, he felt something was wrong. He later described it as a chill in the sunshine. Years later, one of those women appeared in an anonymous blog interview. No name, no photo, claiming a group of famous men once took her to what she believed was a legitimate entertainment event. The post was deleted quickly, but Ashton had seen it, and he remembered the look in her eyes as she stepped onto the yacht's deck. "I couldn't say for sure it was her," Ashton said, "but I couldn't forget that look. I knew something was wrong, but I stayed quiet. Because I was scared. Scared of being blacklisted. Scared of losing investment opportunities. movie roles, partnerships. And that fear, Ashton admitted, kept him silent for over 10 years. And now, with Diddy sitting there at the defendant's table, Ashton wasn't just pointing fingers. He was confessing that fame doesn't exempt you from cowardice. And under the blinding spotlight of Hollywood, sometimes, people lose sight of what's right and wrong. This portion of the courtroom session began to blend Ashton's direct testimony with long-standing rumors that had floated through the industry for years. Hollywood had always operated with a silent language, truths that were never said aloud, but known to everyone in the business. Ashton recalled Diddy's legendary 2009 White Party, an event that, for the first time, made him realize things weren't just about fun. It was a massive event filled with rappers, actors, tech moguls. But what stuck with Ashton wasn't the music or the expensive drinks. It was the presence of a group of people who didn't belong there. Very young women, faces no one recognized, whose origin no one knew. They didn't mingle. They didn't take photos. They just followed instructions from Diddy's private security. Later, one of the videos retrieved from Diddy's home showed Ashton holding a drink, laughing, chatting in a dimly lit room. Faces around him were blurred for legal reasons. When prosecutors played the footage in court, Ashton admitted, "I remember that moment. And I wish I had asked more questions." On social media, Reddit threads about the Rat Pack had been circulating since 2020, spinning wild theories, claiming the group was a modern-day Eyes Wide Shut, that they hosted tightly controlled parties with model scouting agencies operating under false pretenses. Back then, those rumors were laughed off. But once Ashton testified, people started revisiting old interviews, cryptic remarks from celebs like Kanye West and Dave Chappelle. Both had once spoken about the dark side of the industry. But few listened, and even fewer dared believe it. One particularly controversial piece of testimony came from a former assistant of Diddy's, unnamed, but claiming to have been assigned the task of wiping all evidence after events. This person said they saw pre-installed recording devices hidden in corners of Diddy's properties. And those recordings, according to them, weren't for memory's sake. They were tools for control. Ashton didn't confirm that detail. But he did say something chilling. "I was once invited into a private room. Soft lighting, gentle music, and a screen. I didn't ask what it was. I didn't sit down. I just said I had to leave, and walked out." From that moment on, he began pulling away. He stopped showing up at parties, stopped answering Diddy's calls as frequently. But still, he stayed silent, because he knew that without hard proof, speaking out would make him just another crazy celebrity, dismissed by the public. And that's why, when the Diddy investigation exploded, Ashton took the witness stand. Not just to validate what had happened, but to say aloud what hundreds in the industry had whispered in the dark, that Hollywood's glamour isn't free. It always comes with a price. And sometimes, that price is the silence of an entire generation. From a billion-dollar empire to the defendant's seat in a courtroom, the fall of Sean Diddy Combs may go down as one of the most spectacular collapses in American entertainment history. Once seen as the ultimate symbol of the American dream, a no-name kid who rose to become a music mogul, business powerhouse, fashion icon, and one of the most influential figures in hip-hop culture, Diddy's legacy is now being peeled away layer by layer. What's emerging isn't the image of a visionary, but that of a manipulator. Someone who controlled a closed, underground network guarded by money, power, and, most dangerously, silence. Diddy is now facing a barrage of serious allegations: human trafficking, orchestrating and covering up sexual abuse, blackmail, money laundering, and multiple federal violations. While he has not been convicted, the evidence gathered by prosecutors, especially testimonies from former insiders like Ashton Kutcher, are dramatically shifting the scales of justice. What's shocking the public isn't just the list of charges, it's the growing number of names quietly being associated with the case. Among the potential witnesses are people who've appeared in Diddy's music videos, films, or business ventures. Names like Danny Masterson, Wilmer Valderrama, and even a new wave of popular influencers are being mentioned, albeit indirectly, by the media. None of them have been charged, but one truth is becoming harder to ignore. This isn't the crime of one man. It's the symptom of a system, a deeply rooted culture of unchecked power. Some journalists have begun comparing the situation to that of Jeffrey Epstein, the infamous sex financier, who built a network of celebrities, politicians, and business elites around highly selective parties, where law and morality often vanished. Like Epstein, Diddy had the resources, the connections, and the ability to bend media coverage. But unlike Epstein, this time the one exposing him isn't an outsider. It's a former ally, someone who once stood beside him for the cameras, someone who once represented the golden age of Hollywood's cool kids. Ashton didn't take the stand out of revenge, at least not by his own admission. He said he came forward to shed the final role he'd been playing, the role of someone innocent. He knew he'd face backlash, for staying silent, for laughing, for being present at events he now calls a mask for moral decay. But as he told the court, the silence has gone on too long, and when the truth is buried deep enough, it explodes from underground. As this part of his testimony ended, those in the courtroom observed something unusual. Diddy wasn't reacting.
No smirks, no kaki smiles.
Just a blank stare, like he too was watching himself, only not through the flash of paparazzi, but in the shattered mirror of a crumbling empire. The trial is still ongoing. But with Ashton Kutcher's testimony, and more witnesses expected to come forward, a new reality is taking shape. Hollywood may be willing to forgive mistakes, but it can no longer stay silent in the face of truth. When the spotlight fades, when the music stops, when there are no cameras, no assistants, no invites to the next big party, what's left for the people in this story? For Diddy, it may be legal reckoning. For those who were involved, who saw, who knew, but said nothing, it's a battle of conscience. And for Ashton Kutcher, it's now a journey of redemption, public and painfully human. No one can deny Ashton was once part of that circle. He doesn't deny it either. He didn't come to court to rewrite his past. If anything, his testimony resembled a confession, admitting weakness, admitting to complicity through silence, and making a last-ditch attempt to do the right thing. And perhaps that honesty, flawed, raw, and unfiltered, is what's grabbing people's attention. Not because he's a hero, but because he's human. This story isn't just about Diddy. It's a mirror held up to the entire entertainment industry, exposing how fame can cloud ethics, how money can buy silence, and how not asking questions became a survival tactic. These court testimonies are a wake-up call. Where there is absolute power, there's always a risk of abuse. And real light, the kind that brings change, isn't the spotlight. It's the truth. For the viewers watching this from afar, this might be the time to reflect. How are we consuming culture? Who are we applauding? And why? And does fame still serve as an unbreakable shield? If you've watched this video to the end, leave a comment below. What do you think is the truth? Who should be held accountable? Should Ashton Kutcher be forgiven? And does Diddy deserve to be convicted? Don't forget to hit like if you think this video sheds light on something important. Subscribe so you don't miss updates on this explosive trial and other stories from behind Hollywood's glamorous curtain. And remember, no matter how deep it's buried, the truth always finds its way to the surface. No one can escape the weight of truth forever. Ashton Kutcher's testimony was never about seeking applause. It was about accountability. It wasn't about painting himself as a whistleblower, but about acknowledging how deep the silence ran and how long he had been a part of it. He stood there not just as an actor or entrepreneur, but as someone who had finally chosen to break a decade of complicity. It was messy. It was uncomfortable, but it was real. And that's why his words resonated. Not because they were perfect, but because they were painfully human. His testimony didn't just shake the courtroom. It sent shockwaves through the entertainment industry, sparking difficult conversations in boardrooms, studios, and even among fans who once idolized the very culture now being questioned. Because this story, this trial, it's not just about a fall from grace. It's a reckoning. The kind that forces us to ask ourselves, what kind of system allowed this to happen? Who else knew and stayed silent? And what will it take to make sure it doesn't happen again? It also asks us to consider the people behind the personas. Behind every red carpet appearance, every glamorous Instagram post, every perfectly rehearsed talk show moment, there might be a shadow. And some shadows, when ignored long enough, grow into monsters. So what comes next? For Diddy, it may be prison time, pending the outcome of the trial and the weight of the evidence stacked against him. For others who were once connected to his circle, there may be subpoenas, media backlash, or just the moral reckoning that comes from knowing they look the other way. But for Ashton, this is just the beginning of something else. Something far more difficult than fame. The beginning of a very public, very vulnerable process of atonement. And maybe that's what this moment demands from all of us. Not just anger, not just shock, but a willingness to question the systems we support, the stories we believe, and the silence we let slide. Because at the end of the day, truth isn't entertainment. Truth is accountability. And in the ruins of this once gilded empire, maybe, just maybe, we're finally ready to start telling the stories that matter.